Hello everyone, welcome back to the SN Studio for one of our new Tactica series, and today we're going to be looking at the Mhara Mash. So here we are with the Mhara Mash. We are using the Wordbearer's Legion, of course, and it is obviously at 3,000 points. Now, in terms of Rite of War, let's get straight into it. It is the last of the Serrated Sun. It's not a huge priority in terms of list composition, but it is useful for what I am trying to put together with this list idea that I had. Now, in terms of concept, overall, the list is going to be in your face. It's meant to be aggressive, it's meant to be point scoring, and it's meant to be quite resilient. And I will explain all of that as we go through the list analysis. So let's start off with HQs. So HQ choices, let's get stuck in and start off with the Warlord. Now, I have taken, yes, you probably guessed it already, Erebus, the High Chaplain. Now, other than my love of Erebus, as the greatest character there ever was in the 30k and 40k series, there's a lot of utility that comes in with choosing Erebus. First of all, he's 165 points, which I think is quite cheap for what you get, especially if you make him your Warlord. Now, as a Warlord, it becomes very difficult to kill because of his Warlord trait Shadow Behind the Throne, which means that when I'm looking at my list building, he will not slay the Warlord unless it's all gone terribly wrong, which as denying your opponent in terms of that, I think is really handy. Again, cheap, but also on top of that, I think his Harbinger of Chaos ability is one of the main reasons I'm bringing him. He can summon HQs and elite demon choices from Demons of Ruinstorm or the Bound Demons. What does that mean and why is it important for the list? Well, I want to bring some big hitting demons, and Erebus and Lorgar are one of the two only options that you can bring in order to summon. Now, I think that in terms of Erebus, he's very cheap, and he allows me to have that ability into an army without the costs that, for example, Lorgar would bring. So he's the Warlord today, and he will be summoning another one of the HQ options, which I am bringing, which is a Sovereign. From the Demons of the Ruinstorm PDF, as I mentioned. Now, there's a couple of upgrades. Let me just quickly mention those. I have brought Warpforged Flesh for a 2-up save. And then on top of that, I've got Miasma of Rage because I think extra attacks in a list where you're putting a lot of points into something big, like a HQ demon choice, for 25 extra points, you're adding an extra 2 attacks. It really helps in terms of combat resolution. It really helps in terms of slaying those elites that you're going to try and put this demon into. Because on top of that, I've upgraded them to have a Sovereign Greatblade. Even though it's unwieldy, they ignore the unwieldy, which means that you're getting some really hefty punch for your points. Now, this is an expensive choice, but I think for the list, in terms of anti-tank punch, in terms of anti-elite punch, this demon will put the work in. On top of that, because it's summoned in, it means I get a lot of extra mobility in terms of Erebus' option to cast within 12, one of the Warp Rifts, out comes the demon, and you can still charge. I think that's a really strong element that I want to play into in terms of this list to keep that threat saturation going while the rest of my army is scoring points. Now, on top of that, in terms of the Etheric Dominion abilities that you get if you have a Ruinstorm Demons list, I have brought the Putrid Corruption. Why? Because I think Putrid Corruption, giving you that 5-up Feel No Pain on top of your Invulnerable save, on top of your Armour save, etc., is super strong. It just makes it a lot more resilient, and that's kind of the overarching theme of this list. Then rounding off in my HQs, I've gone cheap, but I've also gone, there's a lot of utility in this guy, and that is a Centurion Esoterist. So the Esoterist upgrade allows me to summon, and I think that, again, adds into the theme of the list overall, that I want to try and create that threat saturation through summoning. I think demons can be really strong, and especially if you try and bring them in the first couple of turns, you get that real extra punch. and they're really hard to put down and get out of the way. They're really good speed bumps, for example, to slow down your opponent in certain areas, and this is where the Esoterist comes in. Nice and cheap, and I've given them a force stave just in case he gets into combat, and it's free, so why not give that a go? But he rounds off my HQs. So those are the 3 HQ options for the list so far. Let's get stuck into the troops, and that's coming up next. Starting off with troops, and let's get stuck into the reason the Rite of War is here, and that is the Gal Dreadnought back. I've brought 2 squads of 5 in this list concept. Now, keeping them standard, nothing extra, no extra upgrades on them. They are purely there for, again, threat saturation on the board. They are very quick, very mobile, and they can pack a punch if you can roll those 6s to get Murderous Strike and the Rending off. They have a huge bucket of attacks when it comes in each of them. Now, they're in the troop slots because as the Rite of War, the Last of Serrated Sun, allows you to bring them as troop choices, which is, for this list particularly, because they're not, I'm not spamming lots of units of them, it's purely to free up more slots within the elite section, because that's where they normally sit, to allow me to have my more elites, where you'll see in a moment. But yeah, so 2 units of 5 Gal Dreadnought back. Again, really fast, good, 3 wounds, really tough, and of course they're really quick. So yeah, they're going to get the board, they're going to pressure the enemy quite early on. Now moving on with the other troop choices, I have 2 identical squads here. There are 2 squads of 20 of the Tactical Marines. I have corrupted both of them. What does that mean? Well, it means that they essentially become unmovable bricks. As a word bearer's ability, you can corrupt units that essentially kind of fuses them with demons, and it gives them essentially like a almost small demon-esque ability, whereby they don't run away. Instead, you just lose D3 extra models, and additionally they get fear. So it's a really good tactic to use the fear bubbles, because a lot of things in the army cause fear, because a lot of them are corrupted, which means that, of course, within 12 inches there, you're reducing leadership for a lot of your opponent, and it comes in clutch a lot of the time, and it marries up quite nicely with the Word Bearer's Legion trait, which is that if you win, if you come in a draw in combat, then you win by 1 point. So if you and your opponent fight and then it's a draw, you technically win by 1 according to the Legion trait, which then means they have to take a leadership test, but then also the fear kicks in, which means that suddenly now you have lots more troops running away, lots more opportunities to run stuff down. Now, in terms of the Marines, we have most of them equipped with chain bayonets, because on top of that, the shred and the extra strength is really good for the 2 points per bayonet. Definitely worth it, but don't equip them all with chain bayonets. I've got 4 each squad that don't. Reason being is because you're probably going to lose a couple by the time you get into combat anyway, and even then, because they're big squads, you might not get all of them in combat. So you can keep the ones in the back which don't have chain bayonets, save yourself some points on top of that. In terms of the Sergeant as well, we have a Power Fist on them and Artificer armor, just to keep them resilient, keep them strong, and then you have that little bit of punch when it comes to bigger units, higher toughness units. Then your Power Fist can maybe put some work in and take the occasional wound or model off, which helps in terms of combat resolution. So big old bricks, and of course both the Esoterist will be in one of those and Erebus will be in another, which then triggers into his Warlord trait that allows him to basically not be shot at with precision shots or targeted in any way. It means you've got to chew through all of those Marines, because again, they don't run away. They just suffer extra wounds if they do lose morale in combat, all that kind of stuff. Which means then, yeah, it means Erebus isn't going anywhere anytime soon, which adds the reliability in terms of him summoning the greater demon, the Sovereign, on the table. Now, rounding off the troop choices, we have ourselves 2 units of lesser demons, 15 in each, just because that's how many I could squeeze into the list. I would like bricks of 20 if possible, because the more the merrier. You kind of get in a theme with this list now, and it's staying power. Because these demons, again, like the corrupted Tactical Marines, they don't run away. They just lose extra models. Now, you can go one of 2 ways. You can go, I think it's called Encroaching Ruin, where you only lose 1 model every time you lose a morale test or losing combat, instead of the D3. But I have gone for the Putrid Corruption overall, because I think that offers more survivability during the actual combats and everything else. Which increases their staying power overall. So I've got 2 units of 15 of those. Again, the Esoterist will be summoning those in, hopefully in turn 1 and 2, which means you'll get the benefits then of the extra strength and toughness that the demons get when it comes into fighting and surviving. Because what's great about these guys, you can, like I said, you can move forward your 7, and then you can, on top of that, do an extra 12-inch warp rift with the Breach the Veil, which then means that you're going to potentially either get charging and clogging up units, or you're going to be creating nice speed bumps to slow your opponent down, stop them getting onto objectives, stop them getting into good positions or in the middle of the board for your very, very tough to kill demons. And then honestly, by the time you get into the rounds where turn 3, 4, 5, particularly 4 and 5, where your demons are becoming less and less reliable because their strength and toughness degrades, they've done their job by then anyway. And they're also lying on top of that, so you're going to be scoring units. So there's a lot of scoring in this list, which is another really handy point. So that is the troop choices. Lots of big blobs of tough hitting units that aren't running away anytime soon, which means that your opponent's going to have a real tough time shifting you, and you're going to be stuck in combat with them. Let's go on to the elites, and that's coming up next. Now, the namesake of the list, the Mhara Mash. This is the reason we are all here. There is a funny story behind how I ended up getting 3 Mhara Gal. I'll tell that another day, but I do have 3 of them. If you don't know about Mhara Gal and you haven't played against them, then you are very lucky. And if you have played against them, then you understand the pain that Pardo feels every time I play against him with them. Now, they are so strong. I won't go into all the depths of the stats of them, but essentially they do not die. 8 wounds apiece. They hit like an absolute truck. And what's perfect about them is they are good for hunting other contemptors, because they hit before other contemptors, which means you can really put some pain in against the against contemptors, which we all know are very strong overall in Horus Heresy. Well, these guys can hunt down other contemptors. To be honest, they can hunt down pretty much everything. They have a huge number of attacks, but what I have done with each of these Mhara Gal, there are 3 of them, is that I have given them 2 Tainted Claws rather than what they come with stock, which is the warp plasma cannon. There's no point. They don't have a great ballistic skill, and their shooting ability is not what you need it for. The extra attack is more important. It really just, every time you have an extra attack in there, it means an extra Terminator might die. It means an extra hard, tough elite unit that you're going to throw stuff into. Even other contemptors, it means more wounds coming to them. So on top of that, they are geared to run up the field. They are quick, they have Pathfinder, they have move through cover, they do not care. They just want to get up there and rip and tear, and they are the heart of this army. They are there for, again, pressure on your opponent. You throw them forward. They're, like I said, really tough to kill. They have will die 5 up. It just means that your opponent's going to be so worried about trying to deal with 3 Mhara Gal that your troops are scoring points perhaps, or you're getting into better positions on the board. You're summoning your other demons that are going to put the work in on the flanks or anything else, because these Mhara Gal need to go up the center. They need to go up the middle line and just absolutely put threat saturation onto your opponent. So those are the elites of the 3 Mhara Gal, and then rounding it off, we have ourselves some Apothecaries. We have 2 of them. Each of those are going to go into one of the tactical squads each, which means that they have, of course, a 5 field of bang. Now, you have to pay corrupted points to these to corrupt them both for the unit. So it's better to bring 2 than 1 because you're paying for the points to corrupt the unit. But it just means that on top of course, the 5 up Feel No Pain from the demons, you've got a 5 up Feel No Pain now on both of those bricks of 20 Marines. And of course, you have all of your Galvelback and Mhara Gal, making them really tough to put down, which means overall the list is very, very resilient, at least in theory. That's the idea behind the list and why I wanted to create it, because I think it's heavy on troops, it's heavy on board control, but on top of that, it's very difficult to actually put down. So that's the list in its entirety, exactly 3,000 points, which is a good omen, you know it is. So let's quickly now round up and talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly that comes with this list. So to summarize this list, I've been sprinkling the good throughout, of course, the analysis. But the concept of the list is essentially threat saturation, aggression, and staying power. the opponent, if you catch them off guard and they don't have the ability to put down the Mhara Gal. I'll give you an example. I played against Pardo, and he had brought, I think, around 20 las cannons to try and take down 3 Mhara Gal, and he had struggled to take down those guys. They are beasts. So they're running up. The Garter of Warbak are running up. Behind them, you've got big bricks of immovable marines that are pretty good in combat as well, but also allow you to score points. You have the adaptability of summoning demons in where you want them on the battlefield to either clog up and hold up the enemy units, or cause some havoc to them. Overall, I think it's a very aggressive list. It's huge on bodies, which means you're going to be swarming the board. Now, let's go into the bad. I think that the lack of any heavy support could punish you, especially if you hit a very good gunline army, and you obviously have to get there on the other side of the board. So, of course, when it comes into any kind of backfield support, las cannons, other bits and pieces, which we know can be very useful, this list could suffer against that. Additionally, things like cracking open Spartans and cracking open Land Raiders could be a little more difficult if your Mhara Gal can't get to them because they're busy doing something else, or for whatever the reason. That just means then that your opponent could have carte blanche to shoot away with their tanks and vehicles. Now, in terms of the ugly, I think that, for example, there's a few things. First of all, my worry would be that when you summon something from the warp, then they have the interceptability. And then obviously there's the overwatchability, which suddenly we all know it's, I think, a bit of a pinch point when it comes to Horus Heresy, where it's a little bit too strong. Interceptor is very, very strong, and it just means that perhaps one of your demon units could come from the warp and just get obliterated straight away, which again makes it quite redundant, which means you have to either be really tactical when it comes to where you're putting your warp rifts and where you're bringing your demons in, which a little bit can reduce their effectiveness. But that is a definite ugly and a real problem if you come across the wrong kind of list up against it in that capacity. And then also things like the Esoterists themselves getting blinked by snipers. The Esoterist could get killed, unlike Erebus, which is very good with his Warlord trait, but unlike Erebus, the Esoterist could get just shot straight away, taken off the board, and then you've got 2 units of demons that you're not bringing on. So you've got to be really careful with that, because that could be super ugly if you lose the Centurion straight away, and there is no summoning, because Erebus can only summon elites or HQs. He can't summon troop choices. So yeah, that's a couple of little bits and pieces, but please let me know what you think in the comment section. I want to know what you think is good, what's bad, what's ugly about this list, how you would improve it, or how you would play it, because I would love to hear your feedback. Don't forget as well, if you enjoy our content, that we have SN Plus, where of course you can get extra Horus Heresy battle reports and everything else in between over on there. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again in another video very soon.